English muffins, right? Crunchy, crispy, amazing flavor. There's just something about them that's absolutely delicious. Well, today I'm going to show you how to make an entire loaf, actually 2 loaves, of the best English muffin bread that you've ever tasted. It's got all the holes, it's got all the nooks, all the crannies, but in an easy, quick, no-knead recipe, all right? So, while I'm sitting here buttering my English muffin toast, y'all head over to the kitchen and see how it's done. So the first thing that we're going to do to make our English muffin bread is to grease these 2 bread pans with butter and then sprinkle them with cornmeal. Now, if you don't have cornmeal, you can use flour or anything to keep the bread from sticking. Cornmeal is actually more authentic. It's what's normally used to flour or dust pans when you make English muffins, but it's not necessary. It's traditional. So you have a little bit more of a look if you're doing it with the cornmeal, but you could spray this with no-stick baking release spray, or use oil, or use flour instead of the cornmeal. So don't not make these English muffin breads just because you're out of cornmeal, all right? That's not a major part. So we've got our pans really well greased, and I'm going to put in some cornmeal. Now, this just takes maybe a tablespoon or a little over a tablespoon of pan, and once I've got it really good and buttered, I just turn the pan around like that and try to get it on all sides so that there is no stickage. And then kind of pound it to get the loose cornmeal off. Put the loose in the other pan and do the same thing. Once you have your pans well dusted with cornmeal, set them aside. Next, you're going to take warm water, which I have at about 110 degrees. It's always good if you haven't been making bread for very long, or if you have trouble telling how warm water is with your fingers, go ahead and use a digital Insta-Read thermometer. Just stick it in there. You want it to be around 110 to 115 degrees, definitely no more than 120. It'll kill the yeast. And to that, I'm going to add sugar or honey. Honey is called for in the recipe, but I found myself without any honey this morning. Well, I had jalapeno honey. I just didn't think that would be very good. So I'm using sugar because in bread, almost always you can substitute sugar for the honey. I'm going to stir that in, and I'm going to add my yeast to that and then stir it up. Now I'm going to set it aside for about 5 minutes and until it gets good and foamy. As you can see, the yeast has gotten super foamy, and it's ready to use. So we're going to take the great big bowl, and we're going to add the yeast mixture to the bowl. We're going to set that aside for just a minute and get a clean bowl. And to that bowl, we're going to add 1 cup of the flour, the baking soda, and the salt. And we're going to stir that together really well. Go back to the yeast. To the yeast, we're going to add the milk. And then we're going to add the 1 cup of flour that we mix the baking powder and salt with. gonna whisk that up really well so that it's well mixed. Now, my milk and everything has been at a warm room temperature. The liquids have been warmer than room temperature. The milk and water have been at 110 to 115 degrees. And because that's how yeast grows best. So now we're going to start adding the remaining flour. And the thing about it is as you add the remaining flour, you have to remember that in very humid weather, you may need more flour, and in very dry weather, you may need less flour. So it's not an exact science. You're going for the consistency. So we have 1 cup in there. We're going to add another cup. Whoops. Do you keep bay leaves in your flour? I do, because it does keep the bugs out really, really well, especially in warmer months. And every once in a while, I'll get one I'll forget to check, and I'll get one to drop into whatever I'm making. So if that happens to you, just pick it out and keep going. But that's a good tip. If you have flour on the shelf for longer than maybe it should be, or you live in an area that's warm and buggy, then by all means, adding a couple of bay leaves to the flour will keep it from getting bugs. Now, in the recipe, it says to add the flour and stir until it gets goopy. We are at 3 cups of flour now. The first cup that we put in, and then the 2 cups that we've added since we've added the milk. And this is still too wet. So this is 4 cups. I'm just going to put a half. Once you get to that wet point, just put in like a half a cup at a time. Put in just a little bit more, but I think we're going to stop at this one. It's firm and but it still isn't like you don't want to knead it, right? The thing about it is the more flour you get in there, the more gluten you've got, and the smaller those holes and nooks and crannies that you want in English muffin bread, they're not going to be there. So the goopier it is, and this is goopy to me, the goopier it is, the better texture of English muffin bread that you're going to have. And it's very sticky, it's very wet, it doesn't really hold its shape very well, but it falls off the spoon in one bump. So this is goopy. I've had a lot of people say, what's goopy? Well, this is what goopy is right here. Beautifully goopy. And remember, this only took about 4 cups of flour to get to this point, even though the recipe calls for 5.5. There have been times that I've used 5.5 cups of flour. There have been times that I've used 5 cups of flour. There have been times that I've used 6 cups of flour. It just depends. You want the texture. You want the texture, not an exact mixture. So this is looking good. So we're gonna beat it a little bit. And see, people have also asked if they can make it in their bread machine. You know, you really don't need to. All you need is a big spoon and just stir it around a little bit, and that's it. This is not difficult. You shouldn't need a bread machine for this. It doesn't even take that much stirring. And somebody said that it actually broke their bread machine, so I am probably taking the bread machine instructions out. If I don't take them out, I would caution you to be very careful and use a bread machine at your own risk. There's really no need, because this is such a quick and easy bread to make. And here are our bread pans that have been prepared. And we're gonna try to get about half the mixture in each bread pan. Don't overfill your bread pans. In the best possible scenario, you want this to rise just to the top. You don't want it to come over. English muffin bread should have a very flat top on it. And I'm going to use a rubber spatula to get all of the rest of the dough out of there. But this is a very sticky dough, so I'm going to butter the rubber spatula or oil it so that it slips off easier. I should have probably buttered my fingers at the same time, huh? Because we want to get as much of that dough as possible out of there. Now, if you are creating recipes from my site or other bloggers' site and you keep coming up short with you don't get enough, the bread isn't high enough or there isn't as many cookies as there's supposed to be, sometimes it's because you're leaving too much in the pan, and most of us will really scrape out the pan so that it's almost completely clean to get the most out of it. Those are pretty even. I'm just going to shake them a little bit. Leave them to rise, and we'll come back in about 30 minutes and finish the recipe. So it's been a little over 30 minutes. It's probably been more like 50 minutes because I got caught up doing something else, and that happens. It's risen maybe a little bit more than I would like. I'm sorry if you hear the dogs barking. I've got a repairman here working on things to fix, and the dogs are going nuts. But besides that, so it's risen, it's light, it's maybe a little too light, but I've got the oven preheating to 425, and I'm just going to dust the tops of the loaves with some cornmeal. You do not have to do this part. If you don't have cornmeal, don't worry about it. You don't have to dust it with flour. This is just because this is how English muffins generally are. And then we're gonna put that right in the oven to bake for about 20 to 25 minutes. Okay, y'all, I've taken these out of the oven and I've let them cool underneath a tea towel because I want the crust to be soft. You don't want crispy crust on a English muffin loaf. So here's what we've got. I like them a little more brown than some people do. Now, I want you to notice that, remember I said that I had let it rise a little too long? That's why this one kind of dipped in the center. I don't know if you can see that dip or not, but it dipped down in the center, and that's why it had risen a little too much, and so it wasn't able to hold all that air in it, just flattened out a little bit. Doesn't hurt it at all. It's not going to hurt the texture. It's just where it's gone down. And then this one I didn't let rise too much. I'd gotten it in the oven and then took pictures of this one, so this one didn't have that dip. So let's see what we've got. I let them cool to room temperature because they cut better that way, and I always like to toast mine, so I don't want to cut them warm anyway. If you'll let it cool all the way to room temperature, you're going to have a much better texture on the inside than if you try to cut it hot. So let's cut this and see what we've got. Oh, it's beautiful. Look at that. Look at that. This is what I'm saying. If you're not getting these big holes and nooks and crannies kind of texture, then you are putting too much flour in the batter. Okay, it should be like that, nice and rough textured. Let's see how close I can get it. There we go. Nice and rough textured. Perfect, because when you toast it, these little edges around the holes are going to get crispy, and that when you put that butter on, it's just going to lay on there. It's going to be so good. So this is what it should look like. If yours doesn't look like this, you're putting too much flour in it. Step back a little bit with the flour and you should get this just fine. Isn't that gorgeous? Let's take it over to the table and talk about it, okay? Okay, y'all, here we are. I've got my toast. I've got my butter. It's hot. It's melting into the toast. So delicious. The crust is crispy. It's got those big holes in it, and I am going to take a bite. Oh my gosh, y'all. Sorry. This is so good. I don't want to hurry up and it's so good. I don't want to hurry up and chew it. This has absolutely been a favorite recipe on the blog ever since I posted it. It always rates number 1 or number 2. People love this. It's gotten hundreds of comments, positive reviews, and the reason is because not only does it work, but you get these nice big holes, right? I hate English muffin breads that you slice through them and they have the same texture as a loaf of bread. Something ain't right there, folks. So if you want an English muffin bread that really works, you don't have to knead it, just takes a couple of stirs, and it comes out perfectly every time. It freezes well, it tastes delicious, your family's gonna love it. I don't know why y'all aren't already over there taking a look at this bread right now. I'm gonna sit here and finish this off, and y'all head over to restlesschipotle.com and take a look at that recipe, give it a try. Leave a comment. Be sure to subscribe to the Restless Chipotle YouTube channel so that you don't miss anything. And subscribe to the Facebook and the emails too. I give lots of information. And I will see y'all next time. Love ya. Bye-bye.